everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Gita Marie and I am debunking eco-myths today. I am done. I don't want to see the shit in my comment section anymore. Sometimes there are skewed ideas or misrepresentations of sustainable living and how we practice those things that gets repeated so many times that they end up feeling like universal truths. So I want to debunk some of these today. Some of these things might very well be keeping a lot of us back from actually trying our best, reducing our footprint and becoming happier people at the same time. So let's have a chat today about the 5 most common ones that I have seen and my reactions to them. I'll be debunking them or just at least adding a little bit more nuance to the subject. Let's get started. The first one being that eating a more sustainable plant-based diet is inherently more expensive. And I think one of the reasons why a lot of people think this way is because when we see vegan or plant-based, vegetarian substitutes and products in the supermarket, they are sometimes more expensive than the meat alternative. This can be especially true for protein products. Especially think about more high-end products like Juicy Marble, which I've used quite a few times, but it is nowhere near something that I get every day. But then again, many high-end meat products also very expensive, so you don't have those every day either. I think the overall misunderstanding comes from the fact that most people that follow a plant-based diet or live vegan or vegetarian lives do not eat those high-end expensive substitutes every single day. And you don't have to either. They feel like a little sprinkle of luxury or fun or something that you used to know and you can have that in a different way, but you're not gonna have those things every single day. I love the La Vie vegan bacon, but it's expensive and not something I would buy every day. Same with Juicy Marble. It's like a high-end, more so luxurious meat alternative. I wouldn't buy that for everyday use. Like, I wish I could. The thing is, when you follow a more plant-based, vegetarian, vegan diet, you also have lentils and beans. You have soy and tofu, which is very often a lot less expensive than meat. Like the whole argument that this lifestyle is more expensive is supported by these like singular expensive products, and then you point at those and go, look, the whole lifestyle is expensive. It really is not. Now, obviously, this varies depending on where in the world you are. I cannot say universally that this is always the case. But looking at Danish supermarket and European supermarkets, vegan butter, less expensive than regular butter. Milk from oats, almonds, soy, less expensive than milk. Cream made from oats or soy, less expensive than cream from dairy. And we see this with so many different products. Then there's also the fact that in many cases meat and dairy is cheaper to produce because they get massive tax breaks, they get massive funding, they get massive support. And plant-based initiatives and startups do not get that same helping hand. To sort of say this is actually a lucrative market and we want more of this, they need more funding, and then those products will also become cheaper. Overall, more things can be true at the same time, but you don't necessarily have to spend more on your grocery bill if you start eating a more plant-based diet, because a lot of these things actually are less expensive overall, especially right now with the prices in grocery stores. But overall, I've also seen that sustainable living overall is more expensive than not living sustainably. And to that, I would like to say living more sustainably isn't something that you can buy. It is actually buying less. So if anyone sells you the idea that sustainable living is something that you need to be able to afford, they are misrepresenting what sustainability is in the first place. That whole mentality is based on a product-focused lifestyle, which sustainability is not. We cannot buy our way out of the climate crisis. I also see over and over again that some people just don't believe that individual action matter at all. And to that, I would like to say, poppycock. Individual action matters a lot. It's not the only thing that matters, don't get me wrong. Individual action matters, so does corporate industry action, and so does legislative political action. Those things happen at the same time. But acknowledging that we need political change and we need industry accountability doesn't take away from the fact that we make choices every single day, and these choices matter. Some of them we can change and tweak and make more sustainable, and other times we're kind of caught in a system where we can't be as sustainable as we want to be. But all of these things happen at the same time. The reason why corporative greenwashing exists in the first place is because that we can see that people will pay for the idea of sustainability. That acknowledges in and of itself that consumer action matters. The thing is, we are often being misled, and that's a whole other thing that I'm talking about that in another video. It does matter because we can see businesses and policies changing based on public opinion. But I get it, it's easy to feel small, but that doesn't mean that you actually are. What you do matters a lot. I've seen this idea that sustainability is about going back. It's about taking things back that has already been existing for a while. What I mean by that is that I often see when I say we need to sort of be more mindful with resources and consume less, etc., that we need to scale back on innovation and technology, that we need to scale back on the internet, or like things that exists and that have existed for ages, the energy grid, infrastructure, these kinds of things, that they all of a sudden can't exist in a sustainable world. AI is a really good example of that. Now that we have it, now that it exists, it is really difficult to take it back. But what we use it for, how we use it, and what sort of legislative framework that dictates how this industry works, operates, and what kind of resources they use, those things we can change. But I would never argue that we shouldn't have the internet or that supply chains shouldn't exist anymore because we're a global digitalized society. Like, these things will have to keep happening. But it's about being more mindful with what kind of resources that we're using, a more efficient way of using resources without crossing our planetary boundaries. That does mean that a lot of really rich people will not be as rich in the future. Hopefully, that would be fantastic. But the idea that sustainability inherently has to be regressive, I think we need to get away from. It needs to be regenerative, optimized, and in many ways we need to change our values and idea of a good life and move that away from consumerism as we know it. But saying that we can't have the things that has already been normalized in this world is this utopic idea that we know that's actually not going to happen. But perhaps it could be a good idea to not let the well-being and interests of the global public be dictated by billionaires with private economic interests. Wouldn't that be something? I have seen people say a surprising amount of times that plant-based foods are for privileged white people. There's a lot to unpack here. First of all, changing your diet is inherently a privilege. It takes you from something that you know to something that you don't know. That requires effort, resources, time. It requires you the opportunity and space to fail and get back into it. Like, changing your diet and what you eat is to some extent or another something that requires effort, and thus something that has a certain level of privilege. That doesn't mean that you can't try, that you can't do something. Also, I'm not telling anyone to go 100% vegan, plant-based, anything. Like, honestly, I think we're spending way too much time on those labels and those identity markers rather than just eating in a more sustainable way overall that doesn't require you to identify with anything. But changing your diet overall does come with a certain level of privilege, because changing anything about your lifestyle kind of does. But the idea that this is something that white people invented erases the entire indigenous community of people that have had predominantly plant-based or plant-focused diets. This is not something white people came up with. Lots of white people commodified it to credit, indeed. But it's not where it comes from. A lot of the alternative proteins does not come from white cultures. They came from basically everywhere else. And I can agree as much as the next person that kind of done seeing white people repackage something that has already existed in indigenous cultures forever and then profiting off of that. That is always frustrating. We can use like a tiny bit of effort to understand where these things come from and to learn from indigenous recipes and cuisines and like how these things were traditionally used. Learn from that to become smarter, more nuanced, balanced people. That's always really interesting. But the idea that plant-based foods, that tofu, is something that predominantly white people do. Nah. The entire idea of sustainability being something that privileged and rich people can only do disregards where sustainable practices actually came from. They came from impoverished communities, indigenous people still being the main driving force in protecting natural biodiversity. Like, the idea of using what we already have, repairing things, using resources in a more optimized, effective way came from communities in poverty. And this is my least favorite thing to see anyone comment on my videos, on articles, on anything, there's no ethical consumption under capitalism. Girl, the reason why I hate this so much is that it is so often used as a way of deflecting when you support a company that is directly involved in polluting the environment or exploiting workers. I've seen this a lot on Shein, Temu hauls, where the overall criticism have been, could you please be more mindful with what kind of companies that you're supporting because these people are shitheads. And then getting hit right back with the no ethical consumption under capitalism anyway, queen. Which sort of implies that it doesn't matter what we buy or how much we buy of it or what kind of companies we support, because it is all equally unethical. There is a vast spectrum of how we operate and how ethical that is. That being said, being 100% ethical and sustainable isn't possible in a society not designed for it. For example, I have a smartphone. I know for a fact that smartphones contribute to vast amounts of pollution, vast amounts of waste, e-waste as well as mining waste and the impact of the mining industry and the exploitation of miners during that production. Tech companies are literally willing to completely destroy whole ecosystems to get enough cobalt for their stuff. However, to slightly improve that impact, I got the phone secondhand. You can too. All my tech is actually secondhand. Clothing is secondhand. I repair the things that I own if they break. If I buy something from new, I let it be from a company that is doing something. You can choose to not support the devil of consumerism. And I don't like this sort of deflection tactic where we just go, nothing matters. Because things do matter. Things do matter quite a bit, actually. They matter quite a bit. I know there are tons of nuances to this, and we can absolutely have a discussion of how ethical you can be in a capitalistic system. That is not really what my biggest pet peeve with this phrase is, because that is not the conversation that is being invited in when someone typically says this. In my comment section, in other people's, etc. It is a defense mechanism. What it does is that it just leaves this massive room for nihilism, for nothing matters mentalities, for, well, we're all gonna die anyway, might as well rob the liquor store kind of vibe. And I'm not into it, because there is a vast spectrum of how much we consume, what we consume, where we put our money, who we support, and what kind of world we are investing in when we support those companies. And that being said, those are 5 myths about sustainability debunked. Let me know if you have any more of these myths that you want to see debunked, or if there's anything we should talk about in this kind of format. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments down below, and let's have a chat, share with the group. Thank you so much for watching, have an amazing day, and I will see you guys next time. Take really good care of yourselves. Until then, bye.